gray and rainy and miserable outside. What perfect weather to talk about sonnets.
A sonnet is a type of poem, perfect for talking about, the people you love, the world around you, death, all those sorts of things. A sonnet traditionally has 14 lines, though the way those lines are broken up may vary between poets, just like their ability to stick to the iambic pentameter. I'm looking at you, Wyatt. Petrarch, an Italian sonneteer, is thought to be one of the first people to actually conceive of the sonnet, though it was popularized in England when Sir Thomas Wyatt brought it over and started translating Petrarch's sonnets as his own and adding his own twist to them. It's thought that many of his sonnets were written about a woman named Anne Boleyn, who you might remember as one of Henry VIII's many, many wives. The sonnet that most people tend to think of when they think of sonnets is the Shakespearean sonnet, which was actually invented by Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, otherwise known as Ya Boy Surrey. This sonnet has 14 lines divided into 3 quatrains and then a couplet. Some sonneteers include Shakespeare, Pablo Neruda, Percy Shelley, Mary Shelley's husband of course, Christina Rossetti, Dante Alighieri, and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Today, however, we're going to be talking about Petrarch, Sidney, and Wyatt.
Oh, hi. Didn't see you there. Well, welcome to Miles's Sonnet Corner. Today we're going to be talking about the wonderful world of Italian sonnets, specifically Francesco Petrarch. Now, Francesco Petrarch, absolute god at writing sonnets, is quite famous for the sonnet named after him, quite rightfully so, which follows the ABBA, ABBA, CD, 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 or CDE, CDE format. It functions in the way of having an octave, setting up a problem, then a sestet following shortly after. While this may not seem so new and extravagant to you, it really is actually a quite unique format, a unique way of going about the sonnet, especially during his time within the 1300s. As prior to this, sonnets were very sacred. They were used for religious purposes, and this was his way of bringing about secular sonnets into the world and making them a noble and refined pursuit. Petrarch's sonnet actually became very influential throughout the following centuries as a good basis and format as to what someone can do with a sonnet and go about it, enhancing certain parts of their art and making something truly magnificent. The sonnet that we're looking at today specifically is number 61 of the Il Consigliere, which was a compiled work of many sonnets over the course of several years of Petrarch's life. Now, within the sonnet, as you'll see here, within Petrarch's Sonnet 61, as I have put up here, you can notice that I've highlighted the format that was used with the differing colors showing the A, B, C, and D format. I've also italicized some of the lines that I will be focusing on today. Now, throughout Petrarch's entire sonnet in this, he's focusing on the experience of love for the first time and how it links back to a woman and that instantaneous feeling of finding her and being able to know that he was in love. And throughout this entire experience, he focuses on this moment, the scene, the spot, the very second that he became enraptured by her. And yet, within that beautiful moment, a particular line that stands out is, "And bless the bow, the shafts which pierce my breast," which goes to show that while love is not a universal experience of just pure innate goodness, it also has something that is harmful. It's invasive and destructive, much in the way that the hunting metaphor that comes from it is shown. Hunting allows you to see the beauty of nature, but at the same time you harm something along the way, you create pain. And this is even furthered in the following line with wounds and which bosom thence I bear. And these go on and continue into just setting up the imagery of the metaphor with the glade and grove, the woodlands. The very things seem to echo her name. These differing mystical nature, more primal forces even are repeating back to him these moments of anguish and love and everything that is good and bad about being a writer and a lover in this moment. And while these cliche sort of acknowledgments to your lover may seem, well, cliche, it's actually very unique for the time. People had never really experienced this kind of intensity and love before within a secular sonnet. And that's what made this one so unique, what made Petrarch so unique.
Thanks for coming to my sonnet talk.
I'm Colby Willey, and I'm going to be talking about Sir Philip Sidney today. Sir Philip Sidney was a sonneteer of the late 1500s, the same era that Shakespeare lived in. This was during a time period called the Elizabethan Age, and an age full of poets and artists. Depending on who you ask, Sidney is known as one of the greatest sonneteers of all time, usually surpassed in rank by Shakespeare. That is a topic that many people debate. Both of these sonneteers wrote what is called a sonnet sequence. This is essentially a collection of sonnets that are all connected by the same emotions or theme. Shakespeare had his love triangle sequence consisting of 154 sonnets, and Sidney with his Astrophil and Stella sequence consisting of 108 sonnets and 11 songs. They both have story arcs to them, which is what makes them a sequence. Shakespeare tells the story of his love triangle with a young man and a dark lady. Sidney is telling the story of Astrophil, which means star lover in Greek, and Stella, which means star in Greek. So the star lover and his star. It sounds cheesy, but this was almost 500 years ago, so Sidney could be considered a player to some. This sequence by Sidney, in a brief explanation, tells the tale of a love affair. Basically, Astrophil sees someone named Stella who is everything he has ever dreamed of and starts to develop love for her. Most of the sonnets being speeches to Stella, as we rarely see her speak or provide inner emotions. Stella isn't really into this love for a major part of the sequence and even marries another man. Eventually, the love between the two is mutual, but Stella ends it at the end of the sequence. The sonnet that I'm interpreting, is Sonnet 20, is near the beginning of the sequence, when Stella isn't into Astrophil as much, and he's just kind of being creepy and talking about her. Sidney wrote these almost 500 years ago, so some of the words are written in an older English, when spelling was less concrete. I'm going to bring that up now. Some of the spelling in Sidney's sonnets can be a bit confusing, as we see here with words such as have, where the U is just a placement for V, or murthering, which is another word for murdering back in the day, adding an E onto the end of thief, bloody, tyrant, meaning tyrant. All these words have the similar, if not the same exact meanings. They're just spelt differently because everything was a bit more fluid and Sidney could kind of go with what he wanted in spelling wise back then, whereas nowadays you would be burned at the stake probably. This sonnet is set up as an octave and a sestet. The first quatrain sets up a scene in which the boy who hides in the dark that also happens to have some bullet, which is at this time referred to for an arrow. He then compares the boy to a tyrant or a villain, an insult not to be taken lightly, as a villain back in the day was known as something very evil. So this shows that the speaker sees the boy, or the Cupid, that is who the boy is, as we'll see later, as evil. He explains that the boy had no better place to hide and wait than in the black that covers the sweet heavenly eye. This is a reference to Stella, the speaker's love interest, the speaker's love interest in Sonnet 7 of the sequence. In that sonnet, he referenced how Stella's eyes were black yet beamed brightly. When nature made her chief work, Stella's eyes, in color black, why wrapped she beamed so bright? So the speaker is essentially saying that Cupid is just hiding in these black eyes, Stella's eyes, with his bow, and the moment the speaker is captured by the eyes, the shot will come. This is a scenario that is set up after the first 8 lines. This last 6 lines, or the sestet, unravel the actual event that took place, where the speaker was shot by Cupid, or when he looked into Stella's eyes. He descried or caught sight of the arrow coming out of Stella's eyes as it was shining, glistering as used here. This happened extremely fast, and the speaker wasn't able to escape the dart that Cupid shot at him. This means he is deeply in love with the Stella person due to that dart hitting him, which is just from a glance at her eyes that left him dumbstruck and completely in love. Love at first sight is a very common theme in sonnets of this day and age. This use of a dart or arrow piercing the speaker's heart in the last 2 lines is a reference to Cupid, which means the boy he began talking about in line 2 is also Cupid. That's how we see that connection. Before that, the only hint we had was talking about the bullet, which is an arrow, but we weren't quite sure who the boy was. Reading through the sonnet once realistically does nothing for a person. After reading it once, anyone should go back and read it again to clarify any connections that may have been made, just like this one.
A huge impact on future sonneteers, like a personal favorite of mine, Sir Thomas Wyatt. Wyatt was a poet in the 16th century and is known for his rumored love of King Henry VIII's second wife, Anne Boleyn. A little bit scandalous. He, like many others, did lots of adaptations of Petrarch's work, and a perfect example of this is Wyatt's sonnet Whoso Lists to Hunt. He adapted this from Petrarch's sonnet 156. You can see how he followed the commonly used hunting metaphor and how he deviated from the typical form of a Petrarchian sonnet for his creative needs. So a quick summary of the sonnet: in Whoso Lists to Hunt, Wyatt uses a hunting metaphor to describe the courtship of a woman. Many people believe this woman in the sonnet to be Anne Boleyn due to all the rumors about his love for her. It begins with the speaker stating that if anyone is looking for something to hunt, he knows where to find a hind, meaning a female deer. He goes on to talk about the hunt of this deer, or the pursuit of this woman, is physically tiring, but not mentally, which leads him to continue. The turning point of the sonnet, or the volta, is when it's revealed that it's impossible to capture the deer or win over the woman. He earlier compares it to trying to catch wind in a net, showing how impossible it really is because somebody has already claimed her. She has a collar on her neck with diamonds that basically say, "Touch me not, I belong to Caesar." Side note, the reference of the deer belonging to Caesar and the diamonds on her neck leads to the assumption of the woman being Boleyn, not only from the rumors, but because of the king's status and how she was married to him. Anyway, because the deer has already been captured, the speaker explains in the volta that anyone who thinks she can be caught will spend their time in vain, like he has been, because she's already been claimed. So that's the basic sum up of the sonnet and how he uses the hunting metaphor to center the whole thing around it. Now, we're going to pull up the sonnet and look at the technical aspects and how he follows Petrarchian sonnet and how he differs a little bit. So, when it comes to the technical aspects of this sonnet, Wyatt sticks pretty close to a typical Petrarchian sonnet form, but there are a few instances where he decided to tweak it to fit his own work. For example, Wyatt had a tendency to deviate from keeping his meter structured in many of the sonnets. In a majority of this sonnet, he uses iambic pentameter, which is a line consisting of 10 syllables that have an unstressed, stressed pattern. But, sporadically, there are instances where he breaks the meter and uses 11 syllables instead of 10, which are highlighted in yellow. He also follows the same rhyme scheme for the octave, or the first 8 lines in the sonnet, of A, B, B, A, B, B, A, which Petrarch used, but in the sestet, the final 6 lines, he changes it to C, D, D, C, E, E, which it's typically in a Petrarchian sonnet, C, D, C, D, C, D, or C, D, E, C, D, E. They're not major changes, but there are noticeable ones that we often see in Wyatt's work.